friends. Hello. I am excited to have a return guest. I did not have plans this year to be bringing people back, but it's kind of worked out this way with just some sweet conversations. And I thought, well, yeah, let's do this. Daryl and I connected a long time back through our friend Emily. Shout out, Emily. I think you get a shout out in the episode too. And, he's really the one, if you listen to the first episodes, the one I was talking about that had encouraged me and honestly had shown me the tools to starting this podcast to begin with. So it just feels right to have him back on in this year when I am focused and have clarity in what we're doing here. So that feels really good, but we just had a great conversation. He's got a lot of good stuff going on, and really every time we talk, we really feed off of each other in this space of healthy living and mindset. And so this conversation is all about that. It's our unedited chat with each other about all the things that are going on. And he's got a really beautiful message and movement of being comfortable in your own skin. He has his own story, which he'll talk about a little bit. And I just encourage you to go follow him in all the places. So he's on YouTube and it's in the show notes, but you go find him on Instagram, and he's just a great person to connect with and be in DMs with. So go follow Daryl, and here's his episode. Hello, fellow plate spinners. I'm really glad you're here for your weekly dose of authenticity and joy. I'm Selena Johnson, and your guide through this chaos of busy lives. In each episode, we unpack real tools to conquer overwhelm and dodge burnout. It's all about creating space for what truly matters. Whether it be through solo reflections or inspiring guests, this is your sanctuary for a more centered, productive you, with a healthy serving of that joy we talked about. Get ready to hit pause on life while we dive in to some real chats. Hope you enjoy. All right, you guys. So we have a return guest. I just recently had my first return guest, and this is our second return guest. And really, this is where it all began, Daryl. You're the one that got me to go push record in that closet. So if you've been a longtime listener and been around here for a few years, you've heard me talk about Daryl Perry. Welcome back to the podcast.
I'm happy to be here, and we have to shout out Emily, who was the person that actually got
She's
you and
really
I
where it all began. Yeah.
connected. Yes. So back then, way like three and a half, almost 4 years, which is an eternity and podcast and internet time. She connected you and I, and then I was known as the podcast pusher because I still think, I mean, if you have a story, which everybody has a story, you should have a podcast. But that's awesome that I'm a returning guest. I'm happy.
You're a returning guest. And yes, I know, I think even at the time, Emily said to me, she said, he tells everyone they should have a podcast. So I said, well, so I don't feel that special, but no, but she's like, but you should, but you actually should.
Yeah, well, and that, so that's the funny thing is I think, and this I think people should try things.
Yes, I
You
agree.
don't just to see how it goes, because you never know. And I think you should have some sort of a plan before you start. However, I think a lot of people get caught up in the plan because the plan's easy. You can start planning and feel like you're actually doing something. But I think it's best to have a basic plan and then go out and try it, because then you realize, because you've never done the thing that you're trying to do, your plan really meant nothing. And now the real planning begins as you're getting your experience. And I mean, what's the worst that happens? You do a couple episodes and then you're like, oh, I don't like it. Or in your case, you found that you had a lot to say. And your
I sure do.
So oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I sure do. I think also too, it led me to understand a gifting, for lack of any other phrase I could think of, that I didn't know I had. I didn't know I would be, good in this space. And I also didn't know I would love interviewing people. That's not something I ever saw myself as, a passion for. And so, I think that with anything that we could carry this over into you fill in the blank, just kind of start trying. And I think it's Ryan Reynolds that says, you have to be willing to suck at something before you can get good at something. And, I think you just have to be willing to kind of suck at it for a while and see what it is, where it takes you. And I am so glad that you said, why don't you have a podcast? Because I didn't have a good answer.
Well, and from what I remember, you had a ton of ideas, you had a ton of things to
Yeah, it
say.
was like 6 months. You were like the final, like, that voice.
I was the cleaner. I'm the one that came in and put the hammer down and said, "Look, it like just do it,
That's
just do
right.
it."
Just do it. So I
Or
literally, you gave me access to, you told me where to find the app, which by the way, guys, it's podcasters for Spotify is it used to be Anchor. So,
yeah,
but you like hooked me up with the app and I literally just like, I think within an hour went into the closet and started my
yeah.
podcast. So that's, yeah. And here we are. Here we are. And you have a new one. So tell us about your podcast. I'm so excited to
So
hear more about it.
I have, yeah. So for my podcasts, and I have a few, but my message on everything is I want people to embrace who they are as they are, and basically what
Hmm.
that means is, um, going, looking at your past, looking at where you are right now, being able to remove all the labels, and this stuff I know is way more. It's a simple statement, but a very hard practice.
That's right.
But look at where you're at, embrace it, and then start working on and continue working on the things that you want to work. But I feel like a lot of folks work on things in hopes that they're finally going to like what they see in the mirror or like
Mm.
who they are. And then what happens is even if you're one of the ones that completely runs from your insecurities, runs from your fears, and achieves things, you're almost in this you're in this mental prison almost.
Yeah.
Like you
Yep.
just yeah, this mental and emotional prison. Now for me, everything ties back to that. So I have a podcast that is my name, so the Daryl Perry podcast, and then I have everything tied to your level fitness, which
Mhm.
is basically that message of being embracing who you are, and that's not just skin deep. You actually have to go much deeper, and we can actually attribute my girlfriend Heather with that because I asked her, I was like, "What do you think of this statement?" She's like, "Oh, well, it's so much more than skin deep. Like you have to
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
you have
Yep.
to start with who you are on the inside
That's
and go
right.
out. So like, so my podcasts all center around really, looking at your life, embracing where you're at, figuring out where you want to go and getting there. But there's the Your Level Fitness one. There's the YLF 365 one, which is my take on a challenge on like how to actually do this. Like these
Hmm.
are practices that you do each and every day, and there's an email tied to it, and there's journal entries, and there's the podcast, and then there's how to make it a lifestyle, which is my whole thing of I've been so I started in the fitness industry, gather around children in 2004 when I was in college,
Hmm.
and I'd kind of been on and off with it. I got certified as a personal trainer over a decade ago, and then I did the group fitness stuff that was popular at the time. I did adaptive group. I did all the online coaching, which I still do. It's a component of what I do. But I
Hmm.
basically, this is the thing. What do people tell you? It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. But again, nobody tells you how to really do that.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so it's basically where kind of a similar format where the podcast has a lot of these are solo episodes, 5 to 10 minutes, telling you
Hmm.
how to do this, but it's also where I share all my resources that I use personally, things that I've also used with clients.
Hmm.
And then the other thing away from health and fitness, and this started as a side project again, kind of this whole try it and see,
Yep.
is I think a big thing a big thing that we don't necessarily we're starting to talk more about it, but it is men's emotional health and tied into men's mental health umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking part in the No Shave November fundraiser a couple years or 2022, and I looked at it and they said create your own fundraiser. Well, as you can tell, I've got some practice of starting podcasts. So I'm like, well, let's do a podcast. And I thought this was just going to be like a series that I did for the month of November. I'm like, maybe I can get a couple of guys to talk. And the
Hmm.
crazy thing was, is I started reaching out to men, and like I was stacked with interviews. So
Wow.
this what went from being a little project,
Hmm.
then when it ended up being a 6 month long weekly episode drip, and now is I think there's 48 episodes on it currently. But how it started was I just had men come on, and it's like these are all guys probably age 30 to 55. You know, how was emotional health and mental health presented to you as a child? Punchline: if you know any
Oh,
men in that age group, it wasn't. We just
I
pushed it
love
down,
that.
we stuffed it to
That's
the
right.
side. So I mean, and guys would start with that, and the conversation would go on any number of directions. And some of these conversations got very, very heavy, very fast. And you know this when somebody opens up on a podcast, if it's really emotional, like you're done and you're like, I need to take a nap
Yeah.
because
Yeah. It's emotionally
yeah,
draining for
yeah,
them
yeah.
and you. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I mean, the topics were, we went in a number of directions, but I kind of, I did some solo episodes. I even was going to try to do it as an almost daily kind of solo episode thing for a while,
Right.
but it just, I was watching the listener, like the interviews just get a lot more listens. So then I was thinking, well, what else can we talk about? So I was opening it up and I've got, a form on my website where people, not just men, but people can submit topics. And then if guys want to be interviewed for it, they can. And the reason I say people is, the whole thing with that podcast is I want the conversations to start, whether this is men acknowledging that they have emotion. So having the conversation with yourself that,
Mhm.
what, I feel things.
Mhm.
Or whether it's with a buddy where like, hey, you know what, like, let's talk about this. Like if it can get that conversation going. And the fact that if I look at it statistically, 20 to 25% of the audience is women. So then these are
Mm.
women that have men in their life. So can you
Right.
start this conversation? So, but yeah,
Right.
it's that's the one that kind of has the newest wrinkle to it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, but everything with me is I'm like, okay, look at your life where you are right now, how you got here, and
Hmm.
really be able to embrace who you are and where you want to go. And then, I mentioned that I do the client work, but my other thing with the marketing background, it's like, okay, how can I deliver resources? How can I
Hmm.
set up to where it's not just a podcast, it's not just social media content, but how can I drip it to you? So I do a lot of stuff with email, I do a lot of stuff with text, and I try to make this stuff bite-sized and deliverable. And the cool thing is just from listening to podcasts, that people hear me on a podcast and then they sign up for that stuff. If I get somebody booking a call to possibly, get on the program, which there's tiers of the programs that I do around nutrition habits and things like that, they've got such a good sense of me that
Yeah.
it's very like the conversation is very relaxed. It's
Hmm.
not, most people think if they're talking to someone about possibly working with them one-on-one, it's not like, a lot of sales and follow-up. And that's the thing. Like I don't do follow-up. I don't know how
Yeah.
you feel about it, but like, I don't need to convince people to work with me because it's a very
Right.
like it's a lot of work and there's got to be a lot of trust there. So if you're convincing somebody up front to work with you, I'm not into it.
Yeah. There's such a real need to be bought into it if you're going to make changes in your life. I think I heard something last year and it kind of like, registered with me and I've thought about it so much. I reply it so many times, which is that you have out accountability, like you have somebody who's in your, court and cheering you on and asking you how you're doing and all that. And you have outcome, the results you're looking for. And the thing in the middle that has to be there is ownership and buy-in on the process. Like you could have somebody holding you accountable all day long and you could want the results, but until you want to make the change. I mean, I know for me, it all sounded great until that day when I was like, I got mad enough to want to make a change in
Mhm.
my life. I wasn't taking action. And, I think that often we think it's about the program or or the diet or whatever, the fad is, whatever's going on. And it's so simple. You have to decide you want to make changes and you will find a way to make the changes if that's the case. And I think that we can get caught up in, do they sign up with me or sign up with you or like just do something, decide you're going to do it, make the
Yeah, I
change.
mean it's and I think what you just said is absolutely correct. And this is going to irritate a lot of people in the personal development space because it
Yeah.
pokes a massive hole in everything self-help, which is you're going to make a change when you're ready and not a moment sooner. And you
Hmm.
can't guilt people into doing things. And you
Hmm.
can't make people think that they should do something. And see, this is the thing I see a lot again. All my stuff starts in the health and fitness space. Is like I'll
Hmm.
see people talk, well, you should be ready, and like you should do this, and you've got to be motivated, and you've got to want it. And the reality of it is like when you're ready to make the change, like you said, you will find a way to do it. And the motivation, the discipline, the willpower, all the buzzwords, you rely on those a lot less when you're coming from a starting point of I'm ready to do this. Then you figure out how to structure your habits and your routines. And you're doing that not so you can be disciplined in a productivity machine. You're doing it so like you don't have to put a lot of mental energy
Right.
and willpower or any of that. So like the moments where if that's how you're setting it up and you're bringing it along slowly, you don't have to worry about the grit and the
Right.
drive and all this. And it's like, I mean, when you're doing a workout, yes, there's going to be sets that you're working through or activities or exercises or stations or whatever type of workout you do, where you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and really, I have to dig deep for
Right.
this, to move this, to do this activity. But like, you don't live in that. And I think the problem is what we see on social media and what we hear on a lot of podcasts is like, in order to stand out, people have to be on a scale of 1 to 100, they've got to be 250 all the time.
Yeah.
And the only person I think that is probably actually like that in the motivational space, well, two, is probably David Goggins. I think he absolutely is
He,
that
I
way.
mean, well, he just decides to run 100 miles in an evening. Like, yeah,
And he will tell you that it's
yeah.
that it's we'll keep it clean, that it's F up, like he's F
Uh-huh.
up. He's
Yeah.
not, this is not what you aspire to be. And the other
Yeah.
one,
Yeah. He's like, please
yeah,
don't do this. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I think the other one is a guy that I do have a lot of respect for, which is Tim Grover, the guy that used to
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And I like his message, but I
Me
think
too.
in general, if people are consuming the content of coaches and personality, you're hoping that their person are, yeah, coaches and personalities, you're
Mhm.
hoping that your personality rubs off on them. So like
Yeah.
anybody that listens to me, I'm hoping, my biggest thing when it comes to health, fitness, and your relationship with food is not having guilt. And I will tell you,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I will tell you as somebody that battled body image and did this whole thing that we're talking about of chasing not just health and fitness, but it's a good barometer for everything else, was
Hmm.
chasing aspirational things in hopes that it was going to make me feel better about myself.
Right.
So, but I will tell you, even now where I do feel like I'm pretty grounded in this stuff, I would say that's 85 to 90% of the time. And I think 85%, if you can say that my headspace
Hmm.
is this grounded, or this not emotionally charged 85% of the time, you're doing amazing. The
Yep.
thing
Right.
is, as you've been through life, all this stuff that you're trying to accept and then embrace, you're going to have moments where those pathways are just like they want to veer you off the old path, and you or down
Hmm.
the old path, and you just have to bring yourself back.
Yeah.
And again, I talk about this stuff as someone that has interviewed hundreds of people on podcast, and
Hmm.
someone that has gone through, I was in therapy for 2.5 years as I was going through a divorce and had a big life changes when I started. But like I'm a regular person. And by trade, I'm a marketer. And that's the other thing, is I try to take the stuff that I was trained to do, the branding, the storytelling, using all the tools and technologies to do the opposite of what I feel the fitness and the beauty industry do at large, which is they look at us and they market against our insecurities and say, hey, here you are as a person. You're not enough, but if you do this,
Right.
then you will be. And my entire thing, and again, like I want my content out there, so not only so people can use it, but I wanted to have it delivered in a drip way that is going to be manageable and that they can use at their own pace. And
Yep.
then if somebody ends up working with me, again, there's tiers to this. But even when we're looking at just using a software platform and kind of doing it at your own pace and having to check in with me, every couple of months, I between that and the dozen or so people that I'm willing to work with one on one, we're talking 200 people. Well, if we're
Mhm.
looking at everybody in the world that's being reached by the fitness space and weight loss and beauty and all this, we've got billions of people feeling awful about themselves. So we got to figure
Yeah.
out a way to get this message out, and how, who's going to work best for who. And it's a lot.
Yeah, I think too, it's so unique for each person. And I
Mhm,
think that there are some things that should be consistent across the board. Like I do believe having an intentional routine is going to be the thing that gets it to be,
mhm.
like systematic almost in your life.
Yeah.
This week even I um sidebar, but like this week I'm doing this program and my workouts are like 45 to 50 minutes right now. And so I have to kind of plan in the morning to really do
Yeah.
my morning thing. So I usually, if I do 20, 30 minutes, I have that little buffer. I can move a little slower, but I have to like get up, get to it. Right. And this week I don't know what happened, but I'd like slept in 30 minutes longer than I normally do. And that is so not me. That's like not at all. So I must have needed rest. I don't know, whatever. And I got up and I got moving. And instead of saying I'm going to skip my workout, I like told myself, well, I'm just going to do something different. So I took care of my body. Like I did some stretches and some, mobility and some foam rolling, but I still intentionally moved my body. And I had this thought. I thought the old me would have instantly been like, well, I guess I'm missing my workout today. And I I didn't need to just skip it all together. I just needed to pivot. I needed to make a shift. And I know it's because I've worked so hard to have a routine in place that serves me. It's not the it's not to work out. It's because I know if I don't do that, if I don't intentionally move my body, I have not set the tone for my day and I'm a hot mess by noon. Like I know my anxiety level goes up, my stress levels go up. I'm not as friendly as I normally would
Yeah.
be. Like
Yeah.
all these things are things that I know are the outcomes that I desire in my life. And I know that I have to have that intentional movement to get there. So going back to it's unique, each of us are going to have a system that's going to work. Some people work out better at night. I could not possibly. I've tried it. It's not my jam. Um,
Mhm.
but the thing is don't get caught up in like what someone else is doing and making, trying to make that your routine, but wiggling through enough to just like habit stack, right? Like just continue to find things that work for you and add on to it, and you'll end up with a pattern that serves you. And I think if I love what you're saying, which is that you have to just basically have the intention to make the shifts and then just start making shifts, right? Like it's the 85-15 is such a good example of that. Like if you can nail it, you know what I think it's Mel Robbins says, like if you can give 40% and you gave 40% that day, then you gave 100%. Like not every day is gonna be the
Yeah.
day, Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a few things there that are really important, which is, you mentioned having the routine,
Mm-hmm.
and something I was guilty of because I am very much, um, I I look at the world and see where I can solve problems,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to do that, I have to have time where I let my mind just like hum in the background on whatever it is that it wants to work on. And I've
Mm-hmm.
done this enough to realize this is when one, I'm most productive, but I don't feel like the world's on fire because I'm trying to do task after task after task after task,
Right.
which I think so that with the routines, and I love that you mentioned trying to do somebody else's routine because I feel like I mean, because it's like it would be easy if they could say, okay, here is the routine. And
That's right.
some people will try to position whatever it is they do as the
Yes.
routine. But, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I think that's what a lot of people say. But what you're really trying to do, even if you start with what somebody else has done, is you're trying to figure out where you have to build flexibility into that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this might be something that works for you most days, but in other days, like for whatever reason, and by the way, sometimes it's going to be that you flat out decide I don't want to do it. Sometimes it's, which is okay, by the way, and then sometimes it's going to be what you said when you sleep in. And I like this goes under the umbrella of Mother Nature is undefeated. Eventually, if you are pushing yourself way too hard, way too fast, your body's going to say, "No, we're out."
That's right.
And
It has
that
to be
can happen.
sustainable. Has to be.
And see, the tricky part with that is like you don't know sustainability for you. You don't know consistency for you. You don't know any of this stuff until
Mhm.
you start again putting it
Right.
into action. But then, and I think this is something a lot of people talk about. But there's some nuanced things that I've thought about it recently where they say you're kind of running your own experiment, and that's
Mm.
what a lot of people say. But then the part that people get hung up on is yes, I'm the experiment, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get the outcome. But when things don't go according to plan or that program doesn't work for them, it's very easy to be like, well, again, the whole I should be able to do this? Well, no, not necessarily, because this is a program that has been told you that you've learned about as an like take it out of the box and use it, and that's
Mhm.
just not how things go. And you're
Mhm.
not going to figure out what works for you until you decide to until you just decide that, I'm going to try it, and not look at it not going the way that you thought it would, not as failure, but
That's right.
it's part of learning. And for my routine, so I get up first thing in the morning. I
Mhm.
stretch because I have to, having the CP. And that's the other thing. Here we are, like, and that's the other punchline, guys, is I'm talking to you guys with being about being comfortable in your own skin. Is I was born with cerebral palsy, which I can get into the details of, but basically 3/4 of my body is noticeably disabled. So when
Mm.
you see me, if you see full body stuff of me, you're gonna be like, huh, really? The body
Mhm.
doesn't match the voice. I've been hearing that my entire life. But I have to stretch first thing in the morning. So, and again,
Mhm.
this is something that Heather got me into. I stretch for 15 minutes,
I love
and
that.
then I clean for 15 minutes. Now, the cleaning I do is I do counters and I do bathrooms. Anything
Mhm.
else, like, this isn't the only time of the day that I clean, but the within the first hour of being open, and I don't, or being up, open, yeah,
Mhm. We're
open
open. Yeah.
7-Eleven. Yeah, seriously, that's kind of how I operate.
That's we
But
open. The
like,
shop's open.
oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. Go to shopylf.com right now, pick up some merch. There you go.
There you go.
Um,
There you go.
so stretch for 15 minutes, take a little bit of a break, do whatever I need to do to kind of wake up, and then do the cleaning for 15 minutes. And it's not because, okay, I need to do this to make everything in my house sparkling clean. It's so I can say, wow, I'm super productive. I've already
Right.
cleaned. Like,
That's
I've
right.
done things that in general, um, like, it just, it's, when people talk about mindset, it's trying to figure out the things that are going to put you in that frame of mind. It's not
Yes.
saying I'm just going to be positive. I'm just going to think this way, and I'm going to do this thing. But like, when you can take the pressure off yourself and realize that you're running your own race, and you actually have decades of doing this.
That's right.
you, yeah, I mean, it's,
Preach.
well, and the other thing, so, and I mean, again, I know your corporate background. The only successful person that I've paid attention, because you see all these YouTube videos, adopt the morning routine of Elon and all this stuff. When Jeff Bezos says that he just gets up and kind of has coffee and kind of sort of, just isn't really structured the first few hours that he's open, or again, open, and he is open. The first few hours that he's up, like, that tells me that we don't, I feel like you can habit stack yourself in such a way that you're a productivity machine. You are literally going from task to task to task, and that does take away your ability to take a step back and look at the big picture.
Yep.
But me, for the longest time, that's why, like, I kind of went away from my own personal habit stacks. And I was like, because I need to be able to see the world for what it is. I need to be able to see opportunity. The reality of it is you need both, and you need a
That's
fair
right.
amount of both.
Yep.
But the mix of structure and the mix of kind of open creative time is going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, I just did a one, actually my weekly pods, I talked about it too, is that I do 3 things each day that make me feel productive. And I use the word feel because I think that it can be subjective, right? So I make my bed. Like
Mm-hmm.
first thing I do, I get up, turn around and make the bed. And like I've already done something, right? I move my body. That feels hugely productive. There's so much that comes with that movement, like, my time with God, and
Yep.
I that's when I think through things. It's I have like a little tablet. I jot down ideas while I'm doing, like, I'm so creative during that time,
Mm-hmm.
that I feel so productive on the other side, and also all the other reasons, stressors and all that. And then I also I brain dump in the morning. Like I will just go through and all the things that are up here, I get out, and just those 3 things is exactly what you're talking. Do the things that will make you feel accomplished, will help you realize that you really are doing so many things. I think one thing that I love helping people flip the script on is we do this. I don't know why we do it to ourselves, but at the end of the day, we think about all the things we didn't get done that day because we have long lists. We have a lot of things we want to get accomplished. But what if you looked at all the things you did get done and like, what if that just drove you into the next day and you just continued? It's such a different way of looking at it, but yet it's so powerful because we are doing so much in our days. Like, making kids lunches, helping with homework, going to work. Think about all the things we did at work that counts. Like, we do
Yeah.
so much in a day. Brushing our teeth, we do so much. We are active individuals. And if we can convince ourselves that we don't need to be focused on, I think Brendan Burchard does it. There's an exercise where he's like, has you look in the room for like everything blue, right? And then he says, now tell me how many things were orange. And you can't because you were looking for blue. And it's like, that's what we focus on is what's going to get our attention. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend time thinking about all the things I'm not accomplishing. I want to think about the things that are
It's
moving the
so
needle.
hard. You're 1,000% right, but it's so difficult not to focus on what you don't get done because
I know.
we have become, I mean, you would think all the tools and technologies, they can make our lives easier, but it's been interesting what what was viewed as productive when you and I first came into the workforce versus now. And how much time, and that's another thing. I mean, as far as work, and this is because I used to be tethered to my phone, tethered to my laptop, and in most cases my work days are done at 4 o'clock, and I'm my account, you can get on my calendar between 10:30 and 4, and I will start my work day at 10 o'clock in the morning. My weekends are typically blocked off. However, if I have something like, and again, kudos to you, we're recording this when it's like first thing in the morning for you. So like, you know,
It's how I get things done. I just got to do
well,
it first thing. I start to wind down at the end of the
that's
day.
true. And but I have it to where my weekends are open. So like if I've got something coming up and the only time that I can that we can get together and I can actually make that work is on the weekend, I will do it. But I fell into this whole thing of the hustle culture, the productivity monster, all of this stuff because I'm 10 years into actually building Your Level Fitness, which started as a coaching business, into what I have mentioned as a massive conglomerate. I mentioned the stuff as far as like products and resources, but there's also, if you go to the website, there's a blog where I have contributors writing articles of various lengths, and I have it's like 10 to 12 people that are my contributors as well. And like I'm doing all this, and I'm like, I'm building something that's going to change how people view themselves from the inside out. But damn it, I'm not going to do this as one of these hustle people that works 24/7 because I have I have a life that I want to build. And it's interesting, whereas I have a cause and I have life's work, at the end of the day, the amount of time I put in this is how can I get the message out? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But how is this helping me have the kind of life that I want? Because again, when you start to become comfortable in your own skin, none of this stuff, whether you have a podcast, whether you have a business, whether you have a career, whether you have the relationships that you have, none of it matters if you're not comfortable with who you are at your deepest level. So I've really, I don't, I feel like, I don't know, I might be doing some Yoda stuff and going up on the mountain with where my philosophy's been going over the last
Love it.
few years. But I mean, I look at, it's amazing with whatever space you're in, whatever whatever your dynamics you're in. If you look at something, if you're not satisfied, it's amazing sometimes how just trying to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing actually does get you a lot closer to where you're going to end up. But again, it gets back to this thing we're talking, like you just try and then you continue to inch forward and inch forward. But the tricky part is, and this I think is the way that we're wired, and definitely what's kind of reinforced, is you always kind of look around. Like when you do something new, you look around to see what other people are doing, right?
Right.
Like, am I fitting in? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, this person that had this wonderful idea and this wonderful passion is just like everybody else, the cardboard cutout. So
Yeah, I love this message. It's funny because you and I had talked or before this about just kind of where I'm at. And it's interesting because I used to think that you had to do it a certain way for it to be impactful.
Yes.
And I'm just really learning, like, even with the podcast, I think the conversation that God and I had when he was like, can you just plan a little better? Because I think you have a lot. I need you to be out there with your voice, but you're flying by the seat of your pants. So you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing necessarily. So I've like planned, batched, scheduled in advance, even on social media, the podcast episodes and all that. And it's completely changed the game for me. I'm like, 3 weeks ahead, and I don't have to like stress about it being, you know, like the hustle, right? I don't have to think, and then you think you miss it, and then you think and for some reason you think everyone's seeing all your stuff. So, but they're not. So you can just like chill out for a little bit. Yeah, it's a good feeling to know that I guess the moral of the story is like you're in control of how you set the, if you're feeling like you're being pulled in too many directions, you're being pulled in too many directions, and you probably need to take a good look at, what you're saying yes to and reset. This is where I talk about the power of pause a lot, like stopping.
Well,
Hmm.
and it's pausing is good and taking a step back and reflecting. And you know, having conversations with people that you normally don't have conversations with. And
Yes, I love that.
well, that's what you and I did, because it had been years before you and I had caught up. And it's so funny because I'm in my own little headspace of doing things. Is that I recently, I saw where you could start a brand new podcast playlist on YouTube. So what was I doing? I was taking these video files,
Mhm.
was coming up with show descriptions off of the transcripts. Yes, I was using the chat GPT to help me
Yeah, sure.
and to get my rough drafts. But I was spending a tremendous amount of time putting this stuff on another platform. It
Right.
would take me 30 minutes to do an episode, and I've got a very extensive back catalog.
And then you
And
kind of stop doing it, or you get behind on it because it takes so much time, right? I know.
exactly. And
I
it
know.
gets overwhelming because it's a tidal wave. And you just told me, you're like, hey, you can submit these RSS
Well,
feeds.
yeah, it was one of those magical moments for me too. I'm so glad I got to pay
Yeah.
it forward because I was like, I don't know, I
Well,
just discovered.
so I mentioned kind of how everything is situated with my brand, and I have YouTube is a place that I never really focus too much, but I have your level fitness channel, and it is your level fitness on YouTube. That's been established for years, but there were like 60 subscribers to it, but that had already been established, so it was very easy for me to go back and take the RSS feeds for all the your level fitness podcasts and get those on there. So boom, playlist of the Your Level Fitness interview podcast, 130 some odd episodes. That's good. The daily ones that I mentioned, the While of 365, all 180 of those that
That's
are
amazing. Yeah, go
locked and
subscribe, you
loaded.
guys. You'll have everything at your fingertips.
Oh
It's
yeah.
awesome.
But see, the other one was I had a channel. So I'm fortunate online that I'm either Daryl Perry. I have my first name, last name, or I first name, middle initial, last name. So it's Daryl Perry or Daryl T Perry. So I have Daryl T Perry as a YouTube channel. Because some guy named Daryl Perry that's been making guitars, ironically, since the year I was born,
Oh no.
on YouTube first, but he's been and for anyone playing the home game, that would be 1982. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but I started doing the YouTube, and I had to go through like the verification thing. But once they verified it, I was able to put the men's mental health. That's already on YouTube and it's live.
Good. Great.
The big behemoth, which is the first podcast, which is the Daryl Perry podcast, which was my catch-all for everything at first. That was my solo, that was my interview thing when I started doing that. There's 1,500 episodes on
Oh
that.
my gosh, Daryl.
We are up to there. I checked it earlier this morning. We're up to like 1,100 of those are on
Oh
there.
my
So
gosh.
it's now pulling like
Yeah.
100 to 120 a day. And I'm like, I have done nothing on YouTube to this point, really, other
Yeah.
than putting some shorts out. I have been doing that. But now I'm excited about it because I have these channels that have organized
Yeah.
playlists for the podcast. Now, I'll ask you,
Yeah.
do you did your stuff come up in order? Like, were you using season number and show numbers for your episodes?
Yeah, I think it did.
Yeah,
I think it did. I'll have to go back and look, but I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it put it all in order. Game
So
changer. This is
it
our like promotion for automation, guys. Like find Google. Just
Yeah.
Google ways to automate.
Well, and the funny part is, so one, and this will tie into two things. One with the automation, because see, and this is where you use automation to help you. You don't
That's right.
the low level tell of how much somebody really wants to help people is if they try to use automation to take over every aspect of what they do. If you're using automation to take over tasks so you can do more one-on-one things, whether you're recording podcasts or whether you're doing coaching calls or whatever, if you're using it to assist you, that's that's the difference. So, I love using the AI to do a show description because I'm like, well, if I'm putting this on Spotify or if I'm putting this on YouTube, that's a machine writing for machines. And I still use it for rough drafts. Now I'll tell you, like, so I've, for anybody that has worked in marketing or works in marketing, I have had the privilege to work years on both the corporate side and the agency side, which means you end up working with freelancers a lot. And I've worked with some freelance copywriters that had sizable pedigrees, and the rough drafts, I was like, wow, this is what you're submitting. Okay, cool. Yeah. I will tell you the rough drafts, and that's what I think you really get from the copy with AI. Your rough drafts are better than anything you've ever gotten from the freelancer that was supposed to have a piece ready for you on Friday. Here you are the following Thursday still trying to chase down, and all they got to do is go in the doc, and you could go into the Google Doc and see that they haven't touched it in like 10 days. So AI is wonderful for that. But I mean, the other part of this, so I have all of my other podcasts besides my first one with all the episodes is organized by season and episode number. So I've noticed with YouTube, it's pulling everything over in sequence. The big one, absolutely not. So I go in and look at the playlist.
Because
and it's saying like ADP 692, Almost Daily Podcast 692, Almost Daily Podcast 43, and I look at it, and it took me 2 seconds. I'm like, good enough for me.
Yeah.
Like,
yep. Some things you're just like, yep, that's good.
Yeah. I'm like, good enough for me, because what it's going to do is moving forward, because I'm now calling it the Almost Daily Podcast instead of abbreviating it, and then I'm putting the date in. So since everything is going to be added on the date it's published, it's going to clean itself out.
It'll start.
But it would be very easy for people to procrastinate. And this is what it is. Perfectionism is procrastination. For somebody to say, well, I need to go back through and I need to organize all 1,500 of those episodes in sequential order. No, you don't. No, you're giving yourself busy work versus doing the thing that you really need to do. And for most people, again, if we're talking about the type of stuff that you and I work in, it's actually having the conversation and booking the podcast guest, or if people are trying to develop their own coaching practice business, whether it's fitness, whether it's mindset, life coaching, whatever it is you're doing, that you can get all the certifications in the world. You can do all the graphics in the world. You can write all the stuff, but you got to go out and actually talk to people and pitch your services. And it's scary because most people are going to say no. And it has nothing to do with you personally, but you're going to take it that way because you're like, well, it's my name on the website.
Yeah.
You're saying no to me.
But back to what we were saying about, is that they have to want it. So if they're saying no to you, it's not because of you, it's because they haven't made that choice yet. They are not ready, or they think they, want something different, and that's okay.
Which that's where I think the biggest thing, as far as the biggest thing to remember, if you're getting into any kind of sales thing, if you're selling products, service, whatever, is there are so many people out there. If somebody hears your message and it's not for them, let them go.
Yep.
I don't mind. I mean, like, again, I can appreciate being followed around the internet with retargeting ads. If you do it in a smart way, there's been times I've been like, man, that's good. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my abandoned cart and buy that just because I like what you guys did. But like, I don't think, especially if you're wanting to help people, I don't beat them over the head and guilt them into working with you or trying to. And that was another thing heading into 2022 or 2024, good Lord, 2024, getting back into doing more one-on-one stuff. I stayed quiet the first 2 weeks of January because everybody had a program, everybody had a plan. And
Oh,
a lot of
yeah.
times you're going to get people that are hyped up because it's the new year, and resolutions are fine. The thing that people don't necessarily think of with when you have a resolution, you're like, okay, new year, new me, it starts now. And again, you think it's going to be linear, but as one of the big things that's coming out of our conversation here, none of this stuff is linear. So those
Mhm.
setbacks frustrate people if they're not looking at it the way where it's learning, and
Yeah.
they give up. But I mean, for me, because I was like, all right, it's January 1st, it's time to jump back into the stuff. And I had a plan, and I teased it on Instagram, and I looked at my phone before because I was going to do my launch around 9 a.m. and I'm like, what I have, even though my offering is complete, I look like everybody else. We're going to lay low here a little bit and trust that, waiting a couple weeks, changing the messaging a little bit,
Yeah.
see how it works. And it's worked
Well,
pretty
and
well.
I say this all the time, I've said it on episodes at the end of the year, is that January 1st is a date.
Yeah.
It's like it could be March 13th that you decide. Like
Mhm.
we just like this clean year thing, but I mean, really, even for you launching, it's gonna have just as much impact, if not more, outside of that time when everyone's doing the same thing. Absolutely, 100%.
Which you just gave me the perfect plug for the YLF365 email. So go to yourlevelfitness.com. Actually, go to the website, yourlevelfitness.com. There's a button that says sign up for the daily email,
Yeah, they're
because
great.
whenever you sign up, thank you. Whenever you sign up, that is your day one. So if you
Yeah.
sign up
Yeah.
November 1st,
Yep.
yep. If you signed up on April 5th or April 15th, maybe you just did your taxes and you're like, I need to change
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Um, you're whenever you sign up, that is your day one. And
That's
again,
it.
we talk about you do things when you're ready.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you some fun questions to wrap up.
Cool. Let's go.
What are you feeding your mind with right now? Can't wait to hear.
Um, I keep it very simple from the marketing standpoint. I will listen to Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast, which comes out almost daily. I will listen to him every so often because I found he's the guy that when you're wanting to stay on top of things, he watches trends as they're happening. He doesn't really predict, but he's a practitioner that's in it. So if you listen to him, you're going to be ahead of most other folks on things.
That's great.
And another resource that I really like, a guy that I do come back to, his name is Sven Erlandson, and he
Mhm.
is a spiritual counselor. He is not very spiritual in kind of the way that he is right now. He is, but he's not. Um, he's not what you would think of as a spiritual counselor. But he did a book called "There's a Hole in My Love Cup," and it is
Mm.
essentially this workbook on doing the stuff that we're talking about, like
Mhm.
really connecting with who you are and working on things that have become social media buzzwords, healing journey, things like that.
Yeah,
It really helps you with all this stuff. So
I
those
love it.
those are my resources.
That's great. What brings you joy?
um just getting up and being able to do all the things. I mentioned
Mhm.
having CP, and that this is one thing that I've been very on and off about sharing publicly. But I've
Mhm.
started to do these reels that are
Yeah, I
basically
love them.
just me walking towards the camera and just talking about what my day is, and then I say
Mhm.
this is whatever day it is that I've had CP, because the thing is, CP is caused by lack of oxygen at birth. It means that for some reason you had brain damage at birth, and I was a high risk birth, especially back in the 80s when you didn't have all the technology that you do now. So
Mhm.
like, it sounds cheesy, but every day is a bonus.
Mhm.
Survival was a coin flip, but it's sharing that part of me, something that I've if I wanted to hide it, I could, but I'm getting to the point where I'm not, and I've gotten some really good feedback.
I
So
love that so much. I love
it,
that. I think we all have limitations and
yeah.
there's no comparison in it. So I think each of us can resonate with what, you know what I mean? That
Mhm.
you just kind of that is part of who you are. How are you going to show up with joy despite your circumstances? And I love, and I'm loving your reels. They're really great. What's your favorite way to pause?
Um, if I'm doing kind of the mini pauses, it's going outside, sitting on my deck.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting, that's probably the best way to pause, but I'll also journal. And journals for me are kind of like what you talked about. It's brain dumping. It's whatever my thoughts are. And I've gotten really good to where I can do it for just a few minutes and then I put it down. I may come back to it a little bit later. But those are kind of my day-to-day pause. And then, I've mentioned Heather, I've mentioned my girlfriend, and how it's crazy when you actually have the support system for all the stuff that you want to do, which is what I have now. So when she and I get together, because we met through the internet, and we do the whole distance relationship thing, but when we're together, we put our phones down and we
I
don't.
love that.
Well, so what we found out is 1% of 24 hours is 14 minutes. So then we said interesting. So when we're together, we could actually take 0.5%. We'll say we'll be on our phones for 7 minutes a day. It's typically just taking pictures. I'm like, so when we're together, we're not even on our phones 1% of the time.
Oh,
So
I love that. What a great way
yeah,
to look at it. That's a
yeah.
great
So
idea.
like it's just it's spending time with the people that are important to me. So
I
it's
love
spending
that.
time with her. I have the privilege of my parents living the next town over, and I have the privilege that they're both here. So I
Yeah.
try to spend as much time with them as I can,
Yeah.
and then just try to connect with people because so
Yeah.
much of my work is online. So
Yeah, I love that. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time? You get to pick the age.
mm, we'll go well really throughout life. Honestly, it would be the same thing I would tell 8-year-old me versus 38-year-old me, which is
Mhm.
you're not running behind.
Oh my
You're,
gosh, that's great advice. I
you're
love
not running
that.
behind. Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I love that. That's so good. What is a favorite product that you can't live without?
Product that I can't live without. We're gonna say the Kodiak cake mix because
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
oh my gosh. Well, they got me for Black Friday. They were like 40% off and free shipping on orders of $46 or more.
Yeah.
And that got me 11 boxes that I'm going through. So pancakes,
Stocked
waffles,
up.
baked goods, all the stuff.
Yeah.
I've got the variety.
I
Birthday
saw
cake.
this one on you've I'm sure seen it because you're on Instagram, but I saw this one, it's like a um pancake bowl. And so you take a scoop and then you microwave it. I'm like, well, I do that with a mug cake with
Yeah,
my
it
protein
makes
powder, but I'm like, I wonder if that would be good with that. So we'll have to try it.
I I'd have to try it.
I know.
Yeah, I
Oh my
think so.
gosh. Well, this was great. I'm so glad that you suggested
Yeah.
reconnect. And then that led to us deciding we're going to have you back on this one. So I am so grateful that you did encourage me. I'm so glad you encouraged so many people. And I know that you've got really, really good stuff going on. I encourage everyone to go out to listen on to the new podcast. I think if you have a man in your life, I'm like suggesting it to all the men in my life. So go and listen to that. We'll put everything in the show notes. And then now you can go to YouTube and listen to every episode Daryl's ever put out on any platform. So I
It's
love
true.
it.
Like so for you guys, if for anybody that wants to kind of come into my world of stuff, go to yourlevelfitness.com. I would sign up for the email, definitely get in for the daily email. The other stuff you can go to darylperry.com. So that's DARYLPERRY.com. And then everything just shoots off that. So social media,
Wonderful.
podcasts, I
Make it
try to keep
easy.
it nice. Absolutely.
Yeah, that by the way, as a creator, feels so amazing. I know you're aware. I just started the website after so many years. I'm like, this is so nice because I can literally just point people to one place and not
Yeah.
have to give them all this extra stuff. So, well, thanks for being on. I'm so glad you were here.
I appreciate you having me. Well,
Thank you for listening. I'm just so grateful that you would take the time to be here with me today. I hope that if there's anything that inspired you or got you excited, that you would share it to social media or send me a message with any input or feedback that you have. And just really appreciate the support and the encouragement that I get from you guys all the time. I will keep showing up and I hope you keep listening.